Good evening. On behalf of the Commissioners and staff, I would like to welcome you to the July 27, 2023 City of Roseville Planning Commission meeting. Please put all electronic devices on silent at this time. Agendas are available at the end of the staff table. And if you plan to speak at tonight's meeting, please complete a blue speaker card and return it to the staff table. As a reminder, Planning Commission meetings are broadcast live and replayed throughout the week on Consolidated Communications and Comcast. I will now call the meeting to order. Lupe, may we have a roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Brashears.
Here.
Commissioner Hagen-Joes.
Here.
Commissioner Jensen.
Here.
Commissioner Martin is absent, excused. Commissioner Randolph.
Here.
Vice Chair Pryor.
Here.
And Chair Covington.
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lupe, may we please have staff introductions?
Yes, good evening, Chair. Lupe Nelson, Recording Secretary.
Good evening, Commissioners. Joe Speaker, Assistant City Attorney. Good evening, Chair Covington and Commissioners. Greg Bitter, Planning Manager.
Good evening, Chair Covington and Commissioners. Derek Ogden, Senior Planner.
Good evening, Commissioners. Sean Morales, Associate Planner.
And good evening, Commissioners. Matt Todd, Principal Engineer.
The public comment period is a time for anyone who would like to address the Commission on any item that is not on today's agenda. When addressing the Commission, please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anyone who would like to address the Commission on an item that is not on tonight's agenda? Hearing none, I will close the public comment period. Next, we move on to the consent calendar. The consent calendar consists of routine items that may be approved under one motion as recommended in the staff reports. However, each item may be considered separately upon a request by the audience, Planning Commission, or staff. Tonight's consent calendar consists of one item, Item 5.1, minutes from the July 13th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. Is there anyone on the Commission or in the audience who would like to pull this item off the consent calendar for a separate discussion? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent calendar as listed?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Pryor has made the motion, and Commissioner Jensen has seconded the motion. Roll call, please, Lupe.
Yes. Commissioner Brashears.
Yes.
Vice Chair Pryor.
Yes.
Commissioner Jensen.
Yes.
Commissioner Hagen-Joes.
Yes.
Commissioner Randolph.
Yes.
And Chair Covington.
Yes, the motion is approved. Next on the agenda is requests and presentations. Before we begin, I'll review the meeting procedures. First, we will hear the staff presentation, then we will take questions from the Commission, then we will open the public hearing, the applicant will make a presentation, then we will open public comment and the public will have an opportunity to speak. Then I will close the public comment, and if needed, the applicant can be given an opportunity to provide a rebuttal. Then I will close the public hearing and the Commission may ask questions of staff. Finally, the Commission will consider this item and make a decision based on the information provided in the report from staff and the testimony presented during tonight's hearing. Our first item is item 6.1, a request to approve the conditional use permit and design review permit modification for 143 Clinton Avenue. For the record, file number PL23-0075. Sean, may we have your presentation, please?
Yes, you may. Good evening again, Chair Covington and Commissioners. My name is Sean Morales. I'm an Associate Planner, and I'm here to present the new Pacific School project. The project site is located at 143 Clinton Avenue and includes a portion of the building at 202 Bonita Street and a surface parking lot at 200 Earl Avenue. The site is located at the northeast corner of Clinton Avenue and Bonita Street and is identified as parcel 30 in the city's infill area. The site has a zoning designation of R2 for two-family residential and a general plan land use designation of LDR for low-density residential. Private schools are conditionally permitted in the R2 zone, and a private school has operated on site since 1992 with the first conditional use permit, or CUP, and the current request is for a CUP modification and design review permit modification to add 2 portable classroom buildings to the site. Conditional use permits run with the land, therefore the property is granted the operational allowances of previous planning commission approvals, including that 260 students total are allowed on site. The applicant proposes 179 students. Grades K through 12 are allowed, and the applicant currently proposes grades K through 8. And the academic hours and before and after school hours are as shown, and the applicant agrees to be consistent with that time frame. The request before the commission tonight is for the redistribution of students to the Clinton Avenue portion of the site, increasing the allowed students from 60 to 119 students, and a site plan modification to include 2 portable buildings to accommodate that increase in students. The applicant proposes to modify the site with 2 classroom buildings in the northern portion of the campus. One building is 1,440 square feet and contains 2 classrooms, and the other is 920 square feet and contains 1 classroom. Each classroom will accommodate approximately 25 students. Consistent with the existing building on site in the top picture, the proposed buildings have low-pitched roofs and will be painted to match the existing building. And consistent with the residential character, the buildings are about 15 feet in height with a minimum 10-foot setback, which is consistent with the accessory structure standards that we have in the R2 zone. The applicant proposes landscape screening for the buildings with 6 to 8 foot tall shrubs on the north and west property lines, and existing mature trees will help provide screening as well. A neighborhood meeting was held on June 20th with 6 residents attending and voicing concerns, including with aesthetic impacts, which I discussed on the previous slide, noise impacts, though the number of total students is less than allowed and the operations are consistent, and therefore the noise is consistent with previous approvals. Parking impacts, though parking is consistent with the zoning ordinance standard, and the spaces in the lot on Earl Avenue as well as the handful in front of the building on Clinton Avenue provide approximately double the required parking by code. And there were also concerns with vehicle traffic and pedestrian safety at the Clinton and Bonita intersection shown in the picture here. Traffic calming on existing streets is implemented by Public Works, though planning staff did confer with Public Works to see if there were any possible improvements to the intersection to improve safety that they can make. Though recent studies found that speeds and average daily traffic on Clinton Avenue is consistent with city averages, the Public Works staff did suggest a few enhancements that will improve safety, including yellow crosswalks, upsized signs, and reflective stripes on signposts. And the applicant agreed to fund those measures, and they were included as condition 6 of the conditional use permit modification. Notice of the hearing tonight was sent to property owners within 300 feet and published in the Roseville Press Tribune and on the Arcona website. We did receive 3 comment letters, and the comments were consistent with those I described above from the neighborhood meeting. In conclusion, staff finds that the project is consistent with the general plan, zoning ordinance, and community design guidelines, and the required findings can be made for the requested entitlements. And so staff recommends that the commission adopt the 2 findings of fact and approve the conditional use permit modification subject to 6 conditions of approval, including a modified condition 4, which I mentioned in a staff memo that I sent, and adopt the 2 findings of fact and approve the design review permit modification subject to 49 conditions of approval. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Sean.
Commissioners, are there any questions for staff at this time? Okay. I will now open the public hearing. I would like to invite the project representative for this item to address the commission.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Paul Kiefer. I'm with Pacific Charter Institute, which supports the new Pacific project. It's one of our schools. We're very excited about the project itself and the school, and certainly there's a draw for the community. And I want to just express my appreciation to the Roseville Joint Union High School District that approved us last year. And at this time, they're pleased with our work, and we believe this project meets the needs of the city, and certainly it meets the needs of the community that we're in. And I have no other comments. I appreciate the work you do, and I'm available for comments if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions for the project representative at this time? Okay. I will now open the public comment period. It looks like we have one person who has submitted a speaker information card. Can we call on Mary Lee Sonke? Thank you. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Mary Lee Sonke, and I live at 122 Irene Avenue, 2 blocks from the proposed additions. Is it okay if I read from my notes?
Sure.
I'm writing to express my opposition to the addition of portable classrooms to the New Pacific School at 143 Clinton. I believe that adding these buildings to the existing property would be a detriment to our neighborhood. My family and I have owned our home and resided in the Cherry Glen neighborhood for 11 years. We love the many mature trees, the historic California bungalow homes, the quiet atmosphere. We've enjoyed raising our children close to downtown, to Royer Park, the public library, and the Johnson Pool. As stated at the June 2023 informational meeting regarding the New Pacific School's desire to add buildings to the property, there are currently 103 students attending to the school. The goal is to include grades 6 to 8, increasing the student body to 180 students. And the numbers that I'm reading from are what were presented to us at the informational meeting. Followed by the addition of high school grades and a total of 205 students. The projected enrollment would be capped at 275. While I understand that some of these students may eventually be located at another location, the addition of portable classroom units is not the right mechanism for accommodating the growth planned on the campus. I fully support having a school at the current address. However, I think enrollment should be limited to what the current buildings will accommodate. The space was not intended for that many people, and I'm told the city has rejected the addition of portable buildings in the past. Portable buildings do not fit the neighborhood aesthetic that many neighbors enjoy. The existing buildings are of Craftsman and Art Deco styles and blend well with the neighboring homes. The portable buildings planned will be aesthetically at odds with the style of the neighborhood. And as a teacher, I've used a variety of portable buildings over the years. You can make them look nice, but a portable building still looks like a contemporary and temporary building, not a 1920s bungalow. There's not enough parking to accommodate the current level of students, much less a school of 200 students. Because many houses in Cherry Glen do not have driveways, residents have to park on the streets. Any events the school hosts impact parking and access to homes for residents throughout the neighborhood, not just those homes within 300 feet. This is already a regular occurrence on Irene Avenue when the Lambert Funeral Home hosts funeral services. Adding school events to the neighborhood would compound the problem. The executive director of the school suggested that families would park on the 100 block of Clinton, Cherry, and Fern Streets for evening events. Those streets are already full of resident parking or businesses on Riverside Avenue. School families are not going to want to walk 2 to 4 blocks to get to a school evening event. At the informational meeting, the executive director reported that high school classes will be added to the school. This inevitably means the addition of teen drivers to a neighborhood that already has a problem with cars racing through the neighborhood and running stop signs. Adding teen drivers to the mix will increase safety issues. Finally, the addition of portable buildings to the current lot reduces the already small playground to 15 square feet of grass play space. According to the principals, students begin their morning recess at 9:15 and rotate through recess until lunchtime and afternoon PE classes. This means that the amount of noise and screaming that normally accompanies childhood play will impact the neighboring residents for much of the day. This has already been a complaint from families living adjacent to the current school property. In short, it appears a school supported through public funding moved into a property they knew would not accommodate their intended growth. The requested additions are not fair to the families that have made Cherry Glen their home for 10, 20, 30, and 40 years. The New Pacific School has the means to pursue a bigger property in a location that would not be a hindrance to the longstanding residents of the neighborhood. I ask that the commission reject this request to install portables on a property that is too small and would impact neighbors' comfort and values. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak on this item?
Can you speak if you don't have something turned in?
You can just fill out a blue speaker card after you speak and turn it in then. Please state your name for the record when you get it.
My name's Tamara Sayed, and I live on Earl Avenue. I've been in the neighborhood for 25 years. I concur with everything that the prior neighbor spoke on. If the school doesn't already fit the property that it's at, putting portable buildings isn't a solution because they'll continue to want to grow. Clinton Street is already a really busy street because people try to avoid Riverside, so they already speed down that street as it is. To hear about high school students coming into our neighborhood is also a strong concern about the driving and also about the parking. There's no there's the parking spot. I live on 220 Earl, so just a few houses up. And there's really not enough parking to accommodate both the residents and the school. So I just oppose it just in the way of them having portable buildings and also their lighting. They have permanent lighting that doesn't stop motion, so it blares in the houses and the alleys. And so I'm not sure what they would do for the lightings for the portable buildings, but it would be nice if they had something that wouldn't be on all the time during the night. That's all. Thank you.
You. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? I will now close the public comment period. Commissioners, do you have any additional questions for the applicant?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I have a question for the applicant.
Thank you.
Could you let us know what the reasoning was for choosing portable buildings over stick-built buildings?
So for our organization and the real estate availability, it was due to timing. And so essentially it's timing and the speed in which we would like to get this to match the school year. This process has taken a little bit of time, but and also we're not sure the landlord would let us do that. They were okay with us putting in portables, but we never broached them to actually build buildings.
And I have a second question, if that's possible. You said, or it was stated that there are high school students going to be at the school. What number of high school students, what percentage is at the school?
Oh, yes. So Mr. Pryor, Commissioner Pryor, we're going to have 25 freshmen a year from now. So it'll be 25 freshmen, and the year after that, it'll be 25 10th graders to the 25 freshmen. So our high school is going to be very small. And so from an impact on parking, 9th graders won't be driving, and 10th graders won't be driving. So that would be a 3 years out if that even occurred. And so, and certainly as was spoken, the space may not fit us in 3 or 4 years. And so that's part of the expectation, is that we make sure that we can accommodate both our own plans and also the community that we're situated in. Hence, they're portable buildings.
And my final question is, your new Rancho Cordova facility?
Yes.
What will be the mix out there? Is it high school or?
It's exact same.
Exact same?
Exact same. So we're opening with 108 students, TK5, and then next year it'll be 6 through 8, and the year after that it'll just be 9th grade, 25 students.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Pryor. Any other questions from the commission? for the
I have a
applicant?
follow-up question, and I apologize if it doesn't make sense. You're adding students each year, and you said in 3 years you'll add the 9th grade, which will be 25 students, and then you'd add 25 more, so you'd have the 9th and 10th, which would be 50.
Yes.
And then, so you would have 100 for the high school. Would you still be underneath that cap that the conditioned right now for the total number of students in the school at that point?
No, we wouldn't. And so we would find an alternate site for the high school students. Would be one of our options. And with the time to be able to go through the process to make sure that we can get it, we have time to do that.
So you would theoretically never get to the juniors in that high school that would be driving by the time you hit that cap?
Absolutely not. It will not be the space in 5 years?
Okay.
Or 4 years. That won't be the space for the high school students by the time we reach that cap. Because the high school students will have other needs as well, and wet labs and things like that that we may not even be able to get within the facilities that we have.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Any last questions from the commission to the applicant?
Yeah, just a couple on that. So, and thank you for that, because that was going to be my question, is we were looking at 100 high school students, right? So trying to figure out that cap. The other thing with that is the parking kind of stands out to me, because theoretically, do you think you may be getting to that junior year, that sophomore, junior year of students?
I don't see us getting to the sophomore year.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. And so I see.
Has there already been a game plan put together to look for alternative sites, you know, that foresight, knowing that this is not going to be your forever home for this?
Yes, this has been a great start for us.
Yeah.
And our last thing we want to do is to create disruption in the neighborhood we're in. Cherry Glen's a beautiful neighborhood, and so we're trying to be as least disruptive as possible, but also accommodate the students that are really interested in our school. And so we're hoping that the commission can see this as a nice bridge for us to be able to reach our ultimate size, which is very small in the high school, but they'll still be high school students.
Couple more on this, and this one I think goes to staff. There was a comment made about rejection of portable units, portable buildings. Is there anything that we can elaborate on that, or do we know where that comes from?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
I didn't see it in any of the history I saw, but it may have been something brought up verbally that I wouldn't have seen on record, but I have not heard of that.
Okay. The other piece was, and it's kind of concerning, you know, before I came here, I was part of Parks and Recs, right? So it's all about kids playing and being out there. So the reduction of, you know, I guess that play area, has that been looked at? Is that factual? Will that play area for students be reduced?
We have a large concrete area, which is similar to the playground I grew up on in San Mateo. There's concrete, and so it's a large area. We have both recreation and play equipment that's age appropriate, and so we have room for the students to be able to get their heart rate up. And as the speaker said, we stage our activities to make sure we can maximize the space for the students.
Okay.
It's a small school. The goal is small, so.
Commissioner Randolph, if I could clarify, it's the lawn area that's being reduced. The blacktop area is also being reduced. In the plans, you can see where the portables are. So the lawn area is definitely being reduced quite a bit. The blacktop area, which previous iterations of various schools that have occupied this site have used the blacktop quite a bit.
But with that, because, you know, looking at the 2 units that they have, I see the grass is going to be reduced, and I see park striping in there. I take it that's not a parking lot today?
No, it isn't.
Okay, but there will be a 2-classroom unit occupying that space, right? Or is that the one?
That's all the brown is the facilities, and everything gray is open to the students, gray and green.
Okay. And just one last, and I'll leave you alone.
It's fine.
As far as the actual unit itself, has there been any consideration on potentially some sort of facade to, you know, hey, this is we have portables everywhere. You go to any, you know, location, you're going to find portables. So I totally understand that, but I do understand the area. Has there been any discussion about doing something with the facade to try to tie the look of it into the community?
Can I call him Tim Mathias? He's our architect.
Absolutely.
Tim, do you want to speak to the?
Sure.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Tim Mathias, WMB Architects, architect with the school. No, we have not addressed looking at a facade. Really trying to keep the portables as simple and straightforward as possible and painting them to match the existing building, adding trim accents that tie it into the existing color scheme. So I think really the timing and the cost of putting on facades is not really wasn't in the schedule of the time frame.
Okay. Okay, and again, just from the account here, this is a temporary location because you're planning by numbers, what it sounds like, outgrowing the location. So 5 years from now, possibly not there any longer, or a portion of the school piece. And if that's the case, does that temporary building go away?
Yeah, so we will take possession of those portables, and I believe that the vote that you take tonight will be standing for 2 years, and we would have to come back to you anyhow. I believe there's a time limit to it, or is there not? There's no time limit.
So if it was approved, the conditional use permit would run with the land.
Right.
Once they effectuate their permit. And that basically just redistributes the number of kids throughout the site.
And allow some portables.
Yeah.
But no requirements on the actual unit itself. It's the actual student number.
Correct, for the CUP.
There's already a limit, so they can't go over 260 without coming to the commission to expand upon that. I think in the staff report, the numbers, I don't have it in front of me, were the original conditional use permit, there were 77 students on the north of Bonita. That was the allocation.
60.
60 students to the north of Bonita.
And
200 to the south of Bonita in the bigger facility. And so we're now moving
79.
70
No.
75 students from the south to
From
the
south
north.
to the north.
Is essentially what the conditional use permit modification is doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a few more questions, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah, of course not.
So I just want to get some clarification, make sure I understand. These portables, if we approve this, they're going to come in and they're going to be there.
Yeah.
There's no plan 2 years down the road or whatever to remove them or anything like that. I just want to make sure that I understand what's being proposed here.
I guess it depends on the operation of the school. I would assume, and again, looking at the operation, I would assume that if those portables are used for high school students and not the K through 8 students, and I think the applicant can speak to this better than I can for their plans, then hypothetically those portables could be moved. But if those portables are to make sure that they have enough capacity for the ultimate K through 8 facility. Because I think what I'm hearing is you may not move the entire school, you may move just the high school portion.
Yes, I mean, yes.
Yeah.
That's option of 3 options.
Right.
A reduced high school caseload, and we live within our means on the space, or we grow to the capacity that is in our charter that was approved, and then we would extend beyond what we can do at that site, and so we would need to separate our high school from our K-8. And then the third is we find space that could accommodate the whole program, and the portable would go with us. So those are the 3 options.
And then the other question that I have is for drop-off and pickup on this section that's at the north, what's the plan for that? I mean, I'm not seeing driveways. Is it people just pull up on the street and drop their kids off, or?
I'll have our principal, so we've been through a year with it, so he can. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eric Garber. I'm the principal of the school. I'm happy to answer those questions. We're also excited that we're definitely meeting the needs of the community, and that is the main impetus for why we're having to accommodate for that. And our pickup and drop-off, We actually have two options for parents. One is if you notice along the Clinton side, there is a driveway that can go up on adjacent to the school. And if you see where it says the loading zone on there, and so one option that about 25% to 20% of our parents utilize is they just drive up to the gate and the student walks out and they pick up and then they drive out of the driveway that exits onto Clinton Avenue. And then we also have a walk-up option for the parents that like to come and then pick up their child at the gate. And so we have some street parking right next to our school that most parents utilize. And then also, which isn't on that map, but on Bonita Street next to our other facility, we have another 26 spaces that a lot of parents use and park there and then walk across the street to pick up their child. And so I also am very excited about the crosswalk addition. That's something that we've been talking about the last year just because there are no painted crosswalks that go across Clinton. And so we've done our best to use large bright vests and cones to help kids across the street. But that's definitely a concern of ours, is that there was nothing already built into the traffic control. I can also tell you that pickup and drop off, our record is 4 minutes of having all kids off campus safely and away. On average, it's about 6 to 7 minutes. And so I'm the one out in the street corner helping the kids on the sidewalk itself. I like keeping track of data, and so I always like to see kind of where our time frame is for that pickup and drop-off time. But the last thing we also want to do is create a nuisance where parents are double parking, where parents are causing issues with the neighbors. We've only had one complaint so far about a parent who has blocked a driveway, and it lasted and happened one time. Because the other beauty of a small school is I recognize all the vehicles of every parent that comes, and I knew who the parent was. And so I just called them and then just talked to them, and then we don't have an issue anymore. And so it's very important to us that we're supporting the community and being a part of making the community better. And that's just one other nice step that we can do is be good stewards of our neighborhood. I greatly appreciate the neighborhood and all the dog walkers that come by and throw our balls back over the fence. I've greatly enjoyed getting to be a part of that community as the principal, and also look forward to creating more community events as well too. And definitely want to hear what the community members have to say about any impact that we are having that's negative on their daily lives.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have one last question for staff, if that's possible. One of the residents had a concern about lighting and light pollution in the area from the school, lighting up alleys and neighbouring houses. I see that condition 26 attempts to address that. Does the current school lighting, was that under a condition, or what was the...
I assume that the lighting was installed quite some time ago, and so we could definitely revisit that and utilize that condition you mentioned to make sure that the lighting is shielded.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, I've just got one question for staff. I understand that the total student limit is 260. How is that monitored? At some point, as the school grows, how do we know that there's not 270 students on site or in a given school year? Is there a student report that the city, the school district report?
Yeah, I don't think, to be honest, we haven't, in cases where we've had conditional use permits for student populations, we haven't had an issue with ever encroaching. We haven't received complaints. The one school we received the most complaints about traffic and parking is John Adams Academy, and they have different plans with student populations as they've occupied their different buildings. And they're well under the threat. You can see what happens. They're well under the thresholds, but we don't ask for. We can. We could obviously, if there seemed like there was a problem, we can audit the school. The conditional use permit allows us the ability to, through code enforcement activity, through just making sure they're complying with the conditions of approval.
Okay.
Because the conditions of approval that's their limit. And so we have regulatory authority to check. We don't ask them to report to us, but if
We have there's the ability to audit. You have the ability. Yeah.
We got a call and somebody seemed to think that, oh my God, that place is out of control, we could absolutely call and audit their student population.
Great. That answers my question. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. Any other final questions? Okay. Thank you, staff, and thank you to the applicant for answering our questions. I will now close the public hearing. Would anyone like to make a motion?
If I could make one comment before I do make a motion, just to clarify what my understanding is. So it sounds like the project that's before us is not changing the total number of students that's going to be at the school. It's just balancing it between the two sites. So the conditional use permit is really just to change how that balance occurs. There's nothing else that's occurring with it. So really what we're focusing in on then is the portable buildings. And are they appropriate in that area? And it was good to hear the time frame for how long the school is going to be here and their desire to stay under that cap. Because I have some concerns if it starts to go beyond that cap myself. And hearing them say that they've already got plans to move forward with something should that happen, I'm comfortable with that. So with all of that, I'm prepared to make a motion, and I'm trying to read it here, unless there's any other comments.
Can I just make one comment, which is, it's why I asked about the pickup and the drop-off. Because I have been tied up in the John Adams issue there, but also, the Chilton School over there. If you're hitting it at the wrong time, you're going to be sitting there waiting for quite some time for the safety of the students, and I understand that. But that can be disruptive, and if you don't know that the school is letting out, or you just have an appointment that times you through there, it can be a problem. And so I just encourage the school officials to really work with the neighbors and make sure that that it doesn't become a problem, because there are places in the city where it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hackenjoes and Jensen. Are we ready to, is someone ready to make a motion? Commissioner Jensen, it sounded like?
I'll make a motion that we adopt the two findings of fact and approve the conditional use permit modification subject to the 6 conditions of approval, and adopt the two findings of fact and approve the design review permit modification subject to the 49 conditions of approval, with the caveat that Derek mentioned that the condition on the lighting, we could go back and take a look at that as well, with that condition.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Jensen has made the motion, and Commissioner Hagensjoes has seconded the motion. Lupe, roll call, please.
Yes. Commissioner Jensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Randolph?
No.
Commissioner Hagensjoes?
Yes.
Commissioner Brashears?
Yes.
Vice Chair Pryor?
Yes.
And Chair Covington?
Yes. The motion is approved. There is a 10-day appeal period for this item. We'll move on to item 6.2, a request to recommend that the City Council approve a general plan amendment and rezone for 1202 Samoa Way, for the record, file number PL 19-0047.
Just to clarify, I think I think you stated that there was a motion to approve, but it's to recommend to the City Council, correct? I want to make sure the agenda is.
So the request is
To recommend that the City Council.
to recommend that the City Council approve a general plan amendment and rezone.
I believe it's a deny, correct?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry
That's-
about
you
that.
You have the agenda?
Sorry.
Reading off the script.
Sorry about that. Okay, item 6.2 is a request to recommend that the City Council deny a general plan amendment and rezone for 1202 Samoa Way, for the record, file number PL 19-0047.
Chair Covington, I'm going to recuse myself from this item due to a conflict of interest related to my prior involvement with this project during my time working for the city.
Thank you, Commissioner Jensen. Kinney, may we please have your presentation?
Yes, good evening, Chair Covington and Commissioners. My name is Kinney Shallow, Associate Planner. I'm here to present the Champion Oaks General Plan Amendment and Rezone Project. The project site is located in the infill planning area and consists of 2 parcels located at the corner of Samoa Way and North Kirby Way. The parcels have had a floodway zoning designation since 1977 and a land use designation of open space, parks and recreation, and floodplain. The parcels are adjacent to other vacant floodway zone lots with low-density residential uses to the north and east and Linda Creek to the west, which has a documented history of flooding. The current request is a rezone to change the zoning designation to single-family residential and a general plan amendment to change the land use to low-density residential to allow the future development of a single-family residence on each lot. In 2016, the property owners of the parcel submitted a pre-application to the Planning Division to discuss the proposed project. The city indicated it would not support the project because it was inconsistent with general plan policies and findings for a rezone could not be met. The property owners were advised that the subject properties had a history of flooding and that the city had invested substantial resources in the area to reduce flood risk, which include the purchase of flood-prone residential lots and removing structures from some of those lots. The purchased lots are highlighted on yellow on the slide. While staff indicated they would not support the rezone and land use amendment, the owner still moved forward with the formal project application in 2019, which is the request before you tonight. The zoning ordinance prohibits residential uses in the floodway zone in order to minimize property health and safety hazards. The surrounding area is located within the FEMA Flood Zone AE, which is identified as a special flood hazard area with a base flood elevation of 158 feet. The FEMA floodplain is represented by the darker blue color on this exhibit. FEMA considers this to be a high flood risk area where flood insurance is mandatory. The boundary of the FEMA floodplain indicates the adjacent roadways would be inundated during a flood event. The city's regulatory floodplain is shown in the lighter blue color, which shows more of the project site and the entire street inundated. The city's regulatory floodplain is based on conservative modeling that assumes full build-out of the city. The dwelling units are proposed to be constructed on elevated stem walls with openings in foundation walls to allow drainage pass-through during high-flow rain events and to ensure no additional fill is placed within the city's regulatory floodplain. However, the lots would still be in a risk-prone area because the surrounding streets that provide access are known to flood and become impassable during major flood events. The general plan policies prioritize the avoidance of flood hazards and promote the removal of homes from areas of flood hazard. The policies indicate that development within the floodway is prohibited. The city should regulate flood-prone lands and that areas within the regulatory floodplain and along creekside should be preserved as open space. The project is not consistent with these policies because it would allow development of flood-prone land with residential uses. The findings for a rezone, which are listed on this slide, cannot be made for this project. The introduction of additional residential uses in flood-prone areas does not support the public interest, health, safety, or welfare of existing and future residents of Roseville, and the project is inconsistent with the general plan policies mentioned on the previous slide. Early notification of the project was posted on the Arcona website, and a sign was posted on the project site. A virtual neighborhood meeting was held in August 2020, where multiple residents were opposed to the project and expressed concern related to previous flooding in the area. Attendees were informed that staff did not support the project. Notice of tonight's hearing was published in the Press Tribune, distributed to a 300-foot radius, interested persons, and posted on Arcona. 2 opposition letters from the public have been received and are included as Attachment 3 with the staff report, and the 3rd opposition letter was received earlier today and was provided to commissioners. The letters cite concerns with the flood risk of the project site and the costs and impacts to the local community and the city. Although CEQA is not required for projects that are denied, the city prepared an initial study, mitigated negative declaration, in case the Planning Commission or City Council approve the project. The initial study was released for a 30-day public review period, and 1 comment letter was received from the Central Valley Water Quality Control Board, which consisted of standard permitting requirements, but no comments on the adequacy of the document were received. In conclusion, staff does not support the proposed project because it is not in the interest of public safety, health, or welfare to allow development within areas of flood hazard. The project is inconsistent with the zoning ordinance and general plan, and the required findings for approval cannot be made. Based on the evaluation in the staff report and the information presented tonight, staff recommends the Planning Commission conclude that the two findings of fact cannot be made and recommend that the City Council deny the general plan amendment and rezone. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Kinney. Are there any questions from the commission for staff at this time? Or, yes, for staff at this time? No?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you for your presentation, Kinney. I have a quick question. I was looking back at historical aerial photos of this area, and I was noting that North Kirby Way had a bridge at that point that went across Linda Creek, and by the 80s it was gone, so I take it that was a flooding event that took out that bridge, which would be very close to where these couple of properties are. Are you aware of that?
I don't.
That's my understanding, that would have been the 86 floods.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Pryor. I will now open the public hearing. I would like to invite the project representative for this item to address the commission.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Erica Bernitzer from Mitchell Chadwick. We're Land Use Counsel to the project proponent. I only have a couple quick items that I want to touch on with you guys before the project proponent, the engineer will make a presentation to you guys, getting into a little bit more of the specifics about the flooding and how it's changed over the last several years. But a couple things I want to address first. The two required findings, they can be made here. And I think one of the most important things to realize is that this initial study that was completed by the city, it analyzed whether this project could have any significant impacts. And the reason that a mitigated negative declaration was prepared was because it was found that there would not be any significant impacts from this project. It analyzed within that initial study was transportation, hydrology, land use and planning. And just so you kind of have an idea of some of the actual findings that were made within there, we have quotes that say, project will not have environmental impacts which will cause substantial adverse effects on human beings, either directly or indirectly. Project was reviewed by city engineering staff for conformance with city ordinances and standards. Although requested, general plan amendment and rezone would locate residential housing in flood-prone areas. Compliance with the city's flood damage prevention ordinance would ensure land use planning impacts would be less than significant. Surrounding pedestrian transit and bicycle facilities have already been constructed, and the project will not decrease performance or safety of those features. Proposed project does not have the potential to degrade quality of the environment, substantially reduce habitat or any wildlife species, or create adverse effects on human beings. So the initial study, it is important to realize that the whole point of that was to see what the impacts of this proposed project could potentially be, and it was found that there would not be any significant impacts here. So I believe that, that you could make the first finding then, that this is within the city's, the health, welfare, safety of the city. As to consistency with the general plan itself, the development is not located within the regulatory floodplain, and so it is consistent with the general plan. The general plan safety element also has policies that expressly allow for increased flexibility of development within the floodway fringe, right on the outside of the floodway, the regulatory floodplain in infill areas, and that's based off the fact that these areas are typically older. They were developed and designed before some of the flood studies that have been today and the flood improvements were implemented, and so it allows for some additional flexibility there. Let's see. Additionally, the staff report cites to a 2006, it attaches another 2006 staff report that was for a similar project in this area that was looking to rezone and get new land use designations on a couple properties in the area. The staff report from the staff report for this hearing says that the 2006 staff report found that we should not be, the city should not be allowing the rezone or the land use redesignation. But that's not actually what happened, is they said if you're not within the regulatory floodplain, if the development will not occur within the regulatory floodplain, they did allow and they did approve to rezone and do a general plan amendment there. And that's the case of where we are today, is the actual development that we're looking at would not be within the regulatory floodplain. And so we would urge you to adopt the mitigated negative declaration and to approve make the findings and approve the project, or recommend approval of the project to the city council. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any, but if not, I will turn it over to Greg Bardini, the project proponent's engineer.
Should we have the other presentation, applicant presentation first before questions, or?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Greg Bardini. If we could call the presentation up. I'll make it quick so we don't sit here all night, but go through a little bit of the history. No doubt this area of the city flooded in the past. There's been significant investment by the city to alleviate those flood concerns. Originally, we started with 3 lots, but as you saw in the staff report, there was some discussion of lots adjacent to the floodway. So a decision was made to drop the 3rd lot off because that was the only one that was actually adjacent to the floodway. And when we talk about floodways, we got floodways, which is discussed in the city policy. We have floodplains, both FEMA and then the city's regulatory floodplain. If we go to the next slide. So the project is not proposing development within a regulatory floodway, nor are we proposing it within a regulatory floodplain. There are portions of the citywide floodplain on the properties. The homes themselves are not within any regulatory floodplain. And then the project, as proposed, is not adjacent to natural stream courses, nor are we any adverse to habitat or wildlife corridors. Next slide, please. This just goes back to the history, 20 years ago, the FEMA map, and like I said, this area did have a history of flooding. But next slide. With the investment the city made, they were able to alleviate the flood risk and then start utilizing property that was underutilized along the creek corridor. Other projects that were rezoned and allowed to develop would be the Lexington Unit 3 project, just upstream a little bit. And then there was also the more recent one, Spawn Ranch, at the intersection of Old Auburn. And those were projects that previously were in flood-prone areas, but with the city's investment in flood control, it allowed better utilization of land within the city. Next slide. So this was, again, just a slide from FEMA. We can skip to the next one, please. And one more. Got a little redundant on slides there. So this is the current proposal. So as you see, the floodway is actually the hatched area in Linda Creek. So the floodway is actually in the creek. It doesn't affect any of the properties, just the fringes of them. You have the FEMA floodplain, which is what your FEMA insurance is based off of, and that's the darker blue. So as you can see, the lots are outside the FEMA floodplain, with the exception of maybe the curb return at the north end. And then we've got the city's regulatory floodplain, which is what the general plan references. That is indicated it's a conservative model of the entire shed being built out at max capacity without any upstream mitigation. Based on environmental constraints and water quality standards, probably not probable, but for the basis of public safety, we understand it. As you can see, the homes are not within even the city regulatory floodplain, and we're not proposing fill within the floodplain. The discussion of the streets would be inundated, yes, under a 100-year storm event, depending on which storm it is. There could be the potential for water in the street, and the depths are indicated on the chart as up to 18 inches above the top of curb. We don't feel that that would pose a safety issue of emergency services getting in and out in 18 inches of water, nor is it any different than the conditions across the street where there's existing homes. Next slide. And since we've had all these recent storm events, which as of last year was the biggest storm event that hit this region, we just took pictures of the site during that storm event to show that, you know what, the flood operations is working as planned. You can see the culverts don't even have water all the way to the top. All storms are different, I acknowledge that, but I thought it gave good reference to the great work the city has done on their flood protection. With that, I'll conclude my portion of the presentation and be available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commissioners for either of the applicant presentations?
What are the dates of the photos that were taken? There's no dates on any of the photos.
Some of those were from December of 2021. And then the storm events this year, Mr. Wilson, do you remember the date?
November 2022.
November of 2022. That were the ones at the bottom where the culverts were.
And the 200-year event was October 25th.
We try to keep the comments to the, just so that for the record, everything is through the podium, if that's possible.
Yeah, so then the top pictures were from the 2021 200-year event, and then the bottom pictures where the culvert is from last year's event in December.
Other questions, commissioners? Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I will now open the public comment period. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward to address this item with the commission? Go ahead. We have Rebecca Prettyman.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Prettyman. I am a fourth-generation Roseville family. So I grew up on a little road called Phillip Road. We called it the Sticks. We now call it West Park. So I've been here for a very long time. When we talk about flooding, I understand the gravity because I've lived here and I've lived through it. I live on Champion Oaks. So if you pull up any of the maps, you can see that we're one of the few properties on Champion Oaks that's just out of the floodplain. So I'm going to read to you something my husband wrote. You already have our media package that we put together with actual relevant up-to-date site maps for multiple different sites, not just FEMA, not just the city of Roseville, but multiple parties, so you can actually truly see the full impact. The property owners in Morton and Patalo have intentionally downplayed the flood risk in hopes that the city and unsuspecting homeowners will assume the risk and consequences of living in a flood area. Even in the best case scenario, the road to and from the property will be flooded with 18 or more inches of water during the next high water event. That's 2018 data from FEMA. More current maps from the state show the entire property inundated with water. I would highly recommend the city not approve rezoning. There is no benefit to the local community. I think it's also important that we remember that what we're actually saying. So when people say property, so a structure, but people don't always stay in their structure. They leave their homes, and people have different physical needs. So it is part of city ordinance that if there was an emergency, there was flooding, EMT is not going to that home to rescue the people from flooding. That won't happen. We will, the residents who live there that care about their neighbors. It won't be the builders coming back to make sure that these people are safe. People might have physical limitations. They may be on oxygen. They may be, tied to some unit. So how are we getting them out of a home that might be raised, cross the water to safety? So if the city is already saying we're not sending our bravest and best to make sure that these people are okay, then maybe that's something that we should be taking into consideration. The photos presented, we have photos from this year. I've lived at that home for 5 years. Every year, the street floods. Every year, there is blockage to the ingress and egress. So it's not just 18 inches. If you go back to the junction of Samoa, Hearst, and Champion Oaks, you can't pass it. We actually have to call every winter for emergency services to come out and put cones just for the safety of drivers, because you don't see, since it's a hill and your visibility is diminished, they don't see how deep it gets. So there's a home there. They didn't send the picture of it up there, but on Champion Oaks, the house that's on stilts, the only one that was left, the city allowed that home to remain because it got lifted. 4 other properties the city demolished because it's just not safe to live there. So we've learned the lesson. It's not a spot that we want to build homes. Yes, if this was a longtime Roseville inhabitant, if this was the Fiddyment family and they just want to build their family home, I would understand because they're going to live there. They understand the consequences. This is a builder who's looking to build, sell, make money, and go. And it's the people who live there that don't understand. Maybe they're renters and they don't get that emergency services aren't going to come and help them. That's just the reality of that. So who educates them? Who holds that liability? Well, the city does. Everything gets dumped on you. And then the neighbors who have to take care of it. So back in the 2020 Zoom meeting, all of the neighbors, our feelings are still the same. You know, we need to protect our older neighborhoods. Just because there's land doesn't mean that you need to build on it. We're very grateful that the city of, you've worked in the parks, you know, city of Roseville has more parks per capita than any other city in Placer County. It's because we care about our open spaces. So it's not just the 116-acre park that we get to live by, but we're grateful that we have the open space, we have mitigation. And yes, the federal government has funded the city to, you know, work on the flooding, but that doesn't fix the problem. The streams are great, but it's the backfill. The water goes underneath the ground and then comes back and floods. So it doesn't really matter how much you take out of the stream, the water's still going to flood the road. Do you have any questions before I sit down?
Thank you.
Okay.
Does anybody else from the audience want to speak on this item? Okay, I will now close public hearing, or the public comment period. Are there other questions from the commission for the applicant or staff? Okay. I will now close the public hearing. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion and recommend that the Planning Commission take the following actions: conclude that the two findings of fact cannot be made, and recommend that the City Council deny the general plan amendment and rezone. That's for file number PL 19-0047.
Second.
Commissioner Pryor has made the motion and Commissioner Randolph has seconded the motion. Lupe, may we have a roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Hagen-Joes?
Yes.
Commissioner Brashears?
Yes.
Vice Chair Pryor?
Yes.
Commissioner Randolph?
Yes.
And Chair Covington?
Yes. The motion is denied. Can we have Commissioner Jensen come back?
To clarify, I think the motion was approved.
Oh, the motion was approved.
approved.
The motion to deny the, okay, sorry.
No problem.
I'm not used to that. There is a 10-day appeal period for this also? Or no? There's no-
It's heading to, it still has to move to city council.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Welcome back. Okay. Next on the agenda is the commissioner and staff report. Are there any reports from staff?
I do. First thing I will say is congratulations, Chair Covington, on being elected chair. You won't miss a meeting again. You never know what you'll get elected to do. I do have a report out. We will not be having a meeting on the 10th of August, but we will be having several items on the 24th of August. Trying to do the math in my head. I can also report out that last week, the City Council heard the appeal of the grocery outlet project. They denied the appeal and approved the entitlements. So that project is approved, subject to any potential litigation. That would be the appellant's next step. We have on the 16th, we'll be taking two items that the Planning Commission has acted on recently, the Erickson Senior Living Project and the B-Shine Car Wash. That's the 1100 Orlando Avenue rezone project. Those will be going to City Council. So I'll report out what happens at your next meeting. And I think that should be it for tonight.
Thank you, Greg, and I want to thank my fellow commissioners for voting me in as chair. I really appreciate your vote of confidence, except you, Eric.
I wasn't there.
And I do want to, even if he's not here, thank Chair Martin, or former Chair Martin, for his leadership over the last year. So with that, any other comments from commission before we adjourn? Can I have a motion to adjourn then?
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Commissioner Randolph has made the motion and Commissioner Brashears has seconded the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.